The Death Star is a space station the size of a small moon. It's filled with a hyperdrive, ion engines, over 100,000 laser cannons, 1,000 tractor beams, and of course, a super laser powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. That part's kind of famous in case you hadn't heard. I made a whole video about it before. But while super lasers are fun, and they are fun, what's even more fun is hypermatter. Because if you're going to power a planet-killing laser, I'm going to need to know where all the power is coming from. So the real science mystery of the Death Star isn't the weapon, it's the reactor.
Target the base at Scarif. Single reactor ignition.
Yes, sir.
Today I'm going to break down how the Death Star is supposed to generate its energy and how one person's explanation of hypermatter might be one of my favorite fandom nerd-outs ever. Let's take a step back. All of the ships in Star Wars, whether it's the Star Destroyer or the Millennium Falcon, they're all doing basically the same thing. Something goes in, energy comes out. The only thing that changes is how much energy you get and how much you have to put in to get it. Some of the smaller ships, like the ones without hyperdrives, they're probably running on something like a fission or a fusion reactor, which is totally plausible. Fission is where you split atoms apart. Fusion is where you squash atoms together. Both of them turn a little bit of the mass of the particles into energy, according to Einstein's E equals mc squared. Now, fusion is what powers the stars. It's a technology we're still trying to get working here in our own corner of the universe, but it's not hard to imagine future spacecraft running on fusion reactors. It would be so much more efficient than chemical rockets or ion drives. But as good as a fusion reactor could be, it's probably not going to cut it if we're trying to move a battleship or, you know, punch a hole into hyperspace.
Punch it.
You're going to want something a bit more powerful. Maybe it's even a bit riskier. Something like an antimatter reactor. Antimatter is real. It is not all Star Trek dilithium crystals. Every subatomic particle we know, electrons, neutrinos, quarks, they all have an antimatter twin with the opposite charge. Now, when a particle meets its twin, they annihilate each other. All of the mass is converted into pure energy. In nuclear fission or fusion, you only get a small fraction of the mass that's converted. But a matter-antimatter annihilation, 100% efficient. Like, there's no leftovers, there's no waste here. It's about as perfect an energy source as you could ask for. This makes it a really good choice if you're trying to power like big ships or anything that needs to move through hyperspace. Science fiction, right? Because in reality, there's a problem. Antimatter annihilates the moment it touches normal matter, and everything around us is made out of normal matter, which means you can't just carry antimatter around in just any old fuel tank. Now, even the stuff we create here has to be suspended very carefully in magnetic fields, inside vacuum containers, and the more antimatter you have, the bigger and more complicated those containers have to be. And if the container fails, even just 0.5 gram of antimatter would release as much energy as a hydrogen bomb. So antimatter reactors would give you a lot more power than fusion, but they are so dangerous, very expensive, and they're just not practical, you guys. I've had arguments about this already. I stand by it. It's not a practical solution. So if we want to power a Death Star, we're going to need something else. We need something that can run this battle station that's the size of a moon. We have to go beyond antimatter. We need hypermatter. Now, just to be really clear before we go any further, hypermatter is not real. Fission, fusion, antimatter, all real topics in physics. They're all things that produce energy. We can actually create it. We can measure it. Hypermatter is pure science fiction. It is not based in any real concepts. It's Star Wars' own way of solving its energy problem. But if it's not based on any real physics, what is it? In the expanded lore, hypermatter forms deep inside the Red Hearn system, where radiation from the Red Hearn star cracked open the cores of planets and transmuted their material into something exotic. We love a bit of exotic matter in physics. Now, one rare form of this material is referred to as coaxium. This is the hyperfuel that we see in the Solo movie. Coaxium isn't antimatter. Some people might think it is, but there's no anti-coaxium floating around, which suggests that hypermatter annihilation isn't about matter-antimatter annihilation, it's something different. Coaxium is described as volatile, unstable, massively energetic. It's something that you can't just dump into an engine without some serious containment. So in that way, it does kind of behave a lot like antimatter. We've got high reward for high risk, but it's got some very different physics going on. So if coaxium isn't antimatter, what could it be? And this is where things get really interesting. What I'm about to explain is not canon. It's kind of accepted headcanon, maybe for some people in the fandom, but it's not actual canon or lore. So back in the 90s, an astrophysicist named Curtis Saxton wrote some brilliant technical commentaries on the physics of Star Wars. Now, I'm put them as a link in the description, but this is what the page looks like. One of his ideas was that hypermatter could be made out of tachyons, hypothetical particles that travel faster than light. Now, if you're a big sci-fi nerd, you've heard of tachyons. You mostly come across them in stories about time travel, but we're not talking about time travel. We're talking energy, big energy. Tachyons are hypothetical subatomic particles. What this means is that they may or may not be real. The concept of a tachyon doesn't violate the theory of relativity, but there's no real evidence that it would exist, so they're a possibility, they're allowed by physics, but they're highly speculative and definitely unproven. But here's why they're interesting. Normal particles with mass, like everything we know around us, moves slower than light. The closer you push it towards the speed of light, the more energy you need. To reach light speed, you would need infinite energy, which is impossible. That's why nothing with mass can ever actually reach the speed of light. Tachyons are the opposite. Tachyons exist only above light speed. And as they accelerate faster and faster towards infinite speed, they would actually lose energy. Now, a tachyon has the most mass energy when it's moving just above the speed of light. And the faster it moves beyond that, the more mass energy it loses. So if you could build a reactor that controls that acceleration, you wouldn't need collisions or antimatter or dangerous containment fields. You'd just accelerate tachyons faster and faster and harvest the energy they lose. So the idea works by pulling energy out of the motion itself, and the faster you can process the fuel, the higher your power output would be. And that's what makes it different from every reactor we could actually build. That and the fact that it's not real, of course. Okay, so for this to work as the Death Star hypermatter reactor, it can't be about one simple explosion or one quick energy release. It would have to be about sustaining a reaction over time, kind of like fusion. Controlling that acceleration of hypermatter fuel, harvesting the mass energy that it sheds, and stabilizing that energy into something the Death Star can actually use. And thinking about it this way, the amount of power you could get out of a system like that, is, I don't know if it's even calculable. It's got to be enough to at least run a hyperdrive that's capable of moving a battle station the size of a small moon through hyperspace by the way, as well as like life support systems for over 1 million personnel and shielding, tractor beams, weapons arrays, as well as, you know, the big giant planet killing super laser. Easy. Honestly, ever since the first time I read about this on Curtis Saxton's pages, I was just so excited about it. It's just genuinely clever science fiction engineering. And it's just such a unique way to use tachyons, different to how we always see them in sci-fi. So big respect to Curtis Saxton.
Everything you've heard about me is true.
Now I know what some of the comments are going to be. Oh, you know what, science fiction, don't you? It's easy to think of Star Wars as just fantasy. Blasters, lightsabers, the Force. It's not really about science, of course it's not. But what I like, and this is me talking, is that in all the world building, there are ideas that can actually make you stop and think. And then you have nerds like me, and hopefully you watching this can find ways to weave like real physics into how we imagine these worlds working. Yes, it's speculative physics. No, I am not trying to claim that like it's real or that George Lucas has some like deep insight into theoretical models for hypothetical particles. But seeing if we can make it make sense, it's just so much fun to me. And I hope it's fun for you too. So may the 4th be with you.
Look at him, he's heading for that small moon.
I think I can get him before he gets there. He's almost in range.
That's no moon.
I have a very bad feeling about this.
Guys, if you enjoyed this video, then please do give it a like or drop a comment and let me know what you think. And if you like this kind of nerdy content, then hit that subscribe button. I don't know where it is. I don't know why I'm doing this. If you want even more sci-fi nerd, I think my brain stopped working for a second. This happens regularly. Anyway, if you want even more sci-fi nerd-outs, that's what I'm trying to say, then you can check out my Patreon for special series topics. And as always, stay nerdy. Bye. There's a fucking fly. Lolly, eat the fly. She's not gonna eat the fly.